You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do fucking nothing. Not one of you'll do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think? John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I am gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Nick Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated deathmatch. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up? What is up? MCR family, another daily edition of the show. Usually live at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. in the UK. We were a little bit late today due to a family obligation, but we are here live on YouTube, obviously podcast form on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, basically anywhere you can find podcasts, Podcast Addict, SoundCloud, and all that stuff. And, of course, live on video via YouTube, Mixed Combat Radio. Hit the like button of the show, subscribe, all that YouTube shit. If you're listening on podcast form on iTunes, especially leave that review. Helps for exposure. Shout out to Main Event Mark and Bayside Boxing early in the chat. Hope everyone's having a great day so far. But it's here. It's the day that I have been prophesying for some time now. And it's time to play the sad music, guys. Let's get the extra sad music here. Because the reign of HBO is gone. Long live HBO, long reign, but 45 years, it's over. And obviously we're going to delve into that and all of the particulars on that situation. Of course, we have Billy Joe Saunders testing positive for a banned substance. We're going to get into the specifics of that and how I think a lot of the media and fans are a little bit too quick and have not really looked at the information that's been provided to them. And of course, we're going to dive into that one as well. If you've listened to the show for any period of time, you know how I rant on PEDs and PED regulations specifically, so that one's going to be interesting to dive into, dissect, and see what is real, what isn't, what is, fake news, and what just really has been misreported by the media out there. So definitely cannot wait to chop up that topic as well. Of course, we do have Jon Jones news updates, UFC 230 news and updates, and how they're no longer correlated with each other. It seems like Jon Jones' Alexander Gustafsson rematch is in the works, but for a different event. And UFC 230 is still without an event with less than a month to go. And, of course, we're going to get into the Nate Diaz, Dustin Poirier jockeying on Twitter as to making a new division in the UFC. So cannot wait to chop up this show. Hit the like button of the show. Let's get into it. Because, like I said, let's bring the sad music back, man. It's HBO. They've been around for over 1,000 fights. Right now, I think it stands at 1,111 fights, all ones. I love the numerology of that. I think it's hilarious. Let me get the article up here. R.I.P. R.I.P. HBO announced today via the New York Times that they're leaving boxing after 45 years. And we're going to read a statement by HBO because it's interesting. I'll read some of it. I'm not going to read all of it. It's pretty long. I'll read the first couple paragraphs. Our mission at HBO Sports is to elevate the brand, We look for television projects that are high profile, high access, and highly ambitious in the stories they seek to tell and the quality of production in telling them. Boxing has been a part of our heritage for decades. During that time, the sport has undergone a transformation. It is now widely available on a host of networks and streaming services. There is more boxing than ever being televised and distributed. In some cases, this programming is very good. But from an entertainment point of view, it's not unique. Going forward in 2019, we'll be pivoting away from the programming. Live boxing on HBO, as always, will remain open to looking at events that fit our programming mix. That could include boxing, just not for the foreseeable future. RIP boxing. You will be missed drastically by some, not including me. Just being completely honest. Like it, the brand and the product has sucked for years. But before I get into that whole rant, interesting point about the host of networks and streaming services that now offer boxing. I mean, obviously Top Rank and ESPN have 50+ events scheduled. Matchroom and DAZN and World Boxing Super Series have near 40+, probably near 50+ if you include World Boxing Super Series with Matchroom USA and UK, all their cards combined, in just those two platforms, let alone now the new Fox deal and the upping of the Showtime budget for PBC. Boxing is at a level now where I don't think HBO is in the mindset to compete with that. And it's been this way for a while now. Like I was talking to Marcos, I may mispronounce the last name, Vegas of Fight Hub TV. I probably mispronounced your name, Marcos. I do apologize. I'm not Hispanic, even though I semi-look like it sometimes. And he was saying that, HBO was the heart of boxing. It was sold that way for so long. And I get it. Like, HBO's been around for 45 years. They've been around literally for decades. They've been around since before I was born. So I'm not going to really, contend with the first few decades of HBO's run. I mean, it was the premier network for the sport in the U.S. It just was for a very long time. But it has not been that for quite some time. If you take away the Canelo fights, what have they been in the last 2 years? Since Top Rank left them in 2016, they have had a lack of consistent programming. And overall, their production value and budget has seemingly gone down. The lack of promos, lack of 24/7s. You can just tell the money was no longer in the product, in that brand. And it's such an obvious talking point that I know everyone else has been saying, but shows like Game of Thrones, Westworld, etc., they are such bigger budgets than the previous iterations of HBO broadcasting. Whether it be, was it Rome and etc., like other shows back in the day, was Sopranos, HBO, Showtime? All those shows back in the day used to be just cheaper to make. Nowadays, premium miniseries and television shows are given blockbuster movie budgets. That is the difference. So for HBO, which predominantly gets 90% of the viewership from Game of Thrones, Westworld, and shows like that, why would they invest in boxing? They stopped investing in it. It was obvious years ago. The writing has been on the wall for some time now that this is not really surprising. I know it took a lot of people back by this news, but it shouldn't have. HBO had no, especially when we heard that Canelo and Triple G were free agents, that was really it. That's when it became quite obvious that HBO just wasn't going to stay around. We had the Daniel Jacobs fight against Sergey Derevchenko coming up. Great fight. Cannot wait to talk about that one when it comes. But that's the last HBO fight we have. And it is what it is. The Superfly event in February, that's not happening anymore. There's no reason to have it anymore. It doesn't produce money. Their subscriber rates do not follow boxing anymore. And let's be honest, shout out to Dr. My phone going in the chat saying HBO ran out of stars to invest in. That's not necessarily true. They had Canelo. Let's not forget that. They could have viciously pursued Golden Boy stable with guys like Ryan Garcia, etc., and make them marquee fixtures. and also run it for probably a lower budget like they have been doing. But they're deciding not to do that. They're deciding to, cut their corners, say, okay, we're spending X amount of money in the millions for boxing per year. We can spend that on a whole nother television show that's going to give us more ratings. Unfortunately, that's the case, especially when, like he said, Peter Nelson is saying, or I don't know if this is Peter Nelson particularly talking here, HBO is saying, why would we do that when Fox is producing content better than we are, Showtime's producing content better than we are? They're not saying better than we are, but they basically are. Them saying this programming is very good that's corporate talk for saying, yeah, their programming beats ours. ESPN has been beating them for a while now. All they've had is Canelo Triple G, and the second they were free agents, and we're gonna get into sort of the preliminary rumors and updates on who are pursuing these two fighters, two marquee names. That was really the nail in the coffin. And to be honest, the nail in the coffin was Top Rank leaving them in 2016. When that happened, they lost that relationship and that stable. You lost in basically the entire U.S. market. If you're not working with Al Heyman and PBC or Top Rank and Bob Arum, what do you have to really work with in this market? Like, let's be honest. Like, if you're listening right now, please start thinking about that. Like, really, can you just work with main events in K2? Doubtful. Look at Kovalev's numbers recently. And again, maybe I'm a little bit harsh on this all, but the model's changed. HBO has not innovated or stayed up to date, at least with the time when they used to be the most innovative platform. Like, remember back in the day when 24/7 was innovative. Like, that was a new thing. A 3-part documentary series before a fight to really promote it. That was amazing. That was almost revolutionary at the time. That didn't really happen before. Promos were a thing, but that idea, that sort of dollar amount and marketing dollars towards a documentary series per fight was innovative, but it's costly. And on top of that, their platform just as a whole has not stayed up to date with what ESPN has been doing with ESPN Plus. Even what Showtime Anytime. Showtime Anytime as an app and a streaming service is far and away better than HBO. HBO Now, HBO Go, whatever it is. And I've been hearing boxing fans say for a couple years now that they don't have the HBO subscription anymore. They don't have it. Not surprised. They don't make it a fixture of their programming. Showtime does. That's why their inside metrics show that. I think it was Mike Coppinger came out on Twitter and said that Peter Nelson, again, I'm just might be putting words in Coppinger's mouth here, that Peter Nelson said about 10% or less than 10% of their subscribers wanted to watch boxing for HBO. While Showtime, it was 30 to 50%. That's what Steven Espinoza said, according to Mike Coppinger. That's a drastic difference in what your subscriber rate wants to see. Main Event Mark saying Showtime Anytime rules. Yeah, it is actually a really awesome format, platform, just overall functionality of it. Dr. Mofongo saying 24/7 was such a great show. Oscar Mayweather Hatton among the best. Yeah, Mayweather Hatton was a good one. I mean, they were all good. That's the thing. Like, if you start going down the list of all the shows, even like the Manny Pacquiao ones, they were all phenomenal. Like you can tell by, I'm gonna be rough with these dates and these years, but 2004ish to 2000 and let's say 12, 13. HBO was dominant. And of course, in the decades earlier, they were, of course, the dominant fixture. That's obvious. But I mean, Showtime at that point in 2004, 2012 was really starting to ramp up what they were delivering, even though they've always delivered a good quality product as well. But from 2004, 2012, HBO was clearly dominant in the Cold War between networks. It was clearly the winner. And then around 2013, everything changed. And obviously that coincides around the time that Mayweather left HBO and went to Showtime. How Al Heyman was banned from HBO. These are not coincidences, in my opinion. There's a direct correlation between those factors. You lose the biggest name of the sport. You lose a giant roster of the sport. That hurt it. It did. And then on top of that, like I've said, the overall platform has just not innovated with the time. It has not stayed up to date with what current viewers want to see from entertainment, or at least sports entertainment, I should say, because it's not entertainment. They kill it with their original programming for TV shows. They do. Like, let's be honest. Like Game of Thrones, Westworld, those are amazing pulp culture fixtures. But that is the exact reason why they do not need boxing. RIP, HBO Boxing. Salute to the 45 years that you've given us. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of their broadcast, I'll just be completely honest. From what Chris Mannix has been reporting, Jim Lampley will still stay along with HBO in some capacity, working on some other projects, obviously probably not relating to HBO. I assume that like Real Sports, like that show, which has actually gotten a lot of like awards and accolades, they can put a lot more money into that. They talk about sports journalism and stuff like that in this press release. I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Lampley sort of transitions to that. Max Kellerman obviously is now completely free to work with anyone else for boxing. That's why, if you maybe did not notice, even though he had a obvious employee relationship with ESPN working on First Take with Stephen A. Smith, he wasn't allowed to not allowed to cover their boxing telecasts. That's why they had to bring in like Teddy Atlas and others for those shows, because he was contractually obligated to HBO. So now he's probably free to expand on his duties over at ESPN in their boxing coverage. So don't be surprised if Max Kellerman's on a ESPN telecast in 2019. Again, this all happens in 2019 and when it takes in effect. So the rest of the year will be sort of status quo, even though it's like a what's the term? God, why am I losing this term? It's like a terminal disease. Like HBO is walking out of the terminal disease that we know by December 31st, when that clock hits midnight, it will die. But it's still walking around for a bit like an ugly corpse. So again, 2019, you're going to see Max probably move to ESPN in a greater capacity. Roy Jones Jr., God knows what's happening with him. I don't think he has said anything of that. Fernando Valenzuela saying, "Hey Matt, where you get that Ali painting next to you?" That was a gift to me, actually. So I don't know where that person got it, but it's a nice painting. I do love it. I also got one over there that's all the UFC pay-per-view posters, not all the posters, the pay-per-view posters from UFC 1 to UFC 200. I really like that one. That one's really nice. Then I have a painting over there of some boxing gloves. But anyways, digressing. All of that's been gifts from listeners, from Patreon members. Salute to all of you guys. Patreon.com/MixTimeRadio. But yes, HBO, RIP to you. It's been a good one. Please leave your favorite HBO memory down below in the chat. I will, or in the chat, in the comment section, call in 323-870-4051. Since we are doing this show a little bit later in the day, I assume all of you people in the U.S. that are listening to the show can call in. If you don't, I'm judging all of you. All of you. Nigel, get him in the tower, even though you're sleeping in the UK. Thank you, Nigel. What else? I think that's about it for HBO. Again, call in. I want to hear some good memories. You know, my favorite one would probably always be Mayweather and Larry Merchant when they were going at it. God bless that moment. That will always stay in my head forever. Even though it's not probably the greatest memory of HBO boxing, and a very recent one, to be fair, but that is a great one. But speaking, of course, along the lines of HBO fighters that are now leaving, Triple G, Canelo, the two main fighters, what's going to happen with them? According to Tom Loeffler, by way of Steve Kim, Golovkin being approached by all major platforms. They talk about DAZN, Showtime, etc. Don't be surprised if Golovkin's he's the one that's the least obvious to pick as to where he's going next. I can see arguments for Triple G going to DAZN, going to ESPN. honestly, with the money that Fox has in Showtime, it's a possibility, even though that's probably the least likely just due to not relationships, because Golovkin was always a network guy, so it wasn't really his relationship or lack thereof with Al Heyman that led to him not fighting Al Heyman fighters. It was the network's relationship with Al Heyman. So, if you sit Triple G down now and ask him about Al Heyman privately, I don't know what he says. I don't. I think he takes it seriously depending on what the contract is, because there are legitimate fights over there for him, same as there is Canelo. But, again, I think Canelo, which we'll get to, he seems like he is destined for one network. Triple G is the loose cannon here, who can really go anywhere. He has no belt right now. He's, not really a fading fighter, but to be honest, he's in his last leg of his career. I don't see Triple G lasting till he's 50. I don't see it. He probably only has a few years left in his career at the very top, if that, to be quite honest, especially since he's made the most money he's going to make in his career already with Canelo. He's probably made anywhere from $20 to $60 million from those two fights. That's generational wealth sort of money if you know how to invest it. And he, from what I've seen and what I've talked to him, in private at gatherings before, he's always seemed like a very smart, intelligent guy. He should be good. So again, what do you want right now if you're Triple G? Do you want to try to beat the young guns in Charlo? I don't know. Do you try to go to DAZN, where you might get guys like a Jacobs in 2019? Because Jacobs, obviously, he's going to DAZN now. I think that's obvious if you're not listening. Or if you're not paying attention to boxing. Him being signed to Eddie Hearn on DAZN makes sense. The Jacobs rematch could be there on DAZN. ESPN obviously has just the ESPN network. And, of course, along that lines, with Bob Arum saying basically he wants these two guys. He wants Canelo. He wants Triple G, open to a Golden Boy Canelo deal. And look, here's the thing. Golden Boy already has some sort of relationship, and I use that word very specifically because we do not know the particulars of Golden Boy and ESPN's relationship. We don't know if it was, let's say, like PBC Fighters and Showtime, where there's no actual contract between the fighter and the network. There's just some vague relationship between the two. Or is there an actual contract between Golden Boy and ESPN? We don't know. It's kind of left in the air. Same with Top Rank, but they're a little more specific about there actually being a deal in place, a contract in place. So is Golden Boy automatically going to funnel Canelo to ESPN now? That would be my assumption, to be quite honest. I think it's the safe pick that Canelo Alvarez goes to ESPN, where Golden Boy already has cards. They try to put guys like Ryan Garcia as a fixture of that before they sort of moved him to Facebook. And let's be honest, you don't put Canelo on Facebook or Facebook pay-per-view if there's such a thing. That just doesn't make sense. You put him on ESPN. ESPN Deportes has, I think, a really solid boxing program, not program, but just content overall, like how they cover boxing from what I've known. I think that just makes the most sense for Canelo. Now, if you're Triple G, do you follow that Canelo money train? And even though ESPN doesn't have a wealth of middleweights, because they really don't, just it's going to be curious to see what happens next for these two massive stars in the sport. Canelo, arguably, if not the biggest star in the sport right now that's active, or we're going to get to that later with some Mayweather news. It's sort of a safe bet for Canelo to ESPN. Again, Triple G, where does he go? And the whole fallout of HBO ending, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Main Event Marks and Deportes wants Canelo. Of course they do. That just makes the most sense in the world. Let's get to this Billy Joe Saunders news, man. Per Dan Rayfield, breaking news, middleweight world title holder Billy Joe Saunders has failed a voluntary anti-doping association drug test for the banned substance oxyferin, a stimulant. Multiple sources with knowledge of the test told ESPN on Thursday. Now, let's get to the statement from Billy Joe Saunders, which actually, I mean, it's all the points I was going to say, so I'm not going to really hate on it that much. Oh, God, I hate when it does this. Hold on one second, folks. I apologize. As I try to get this picture up. No, Siri, I do not want you. God, she is so needy. Okay, let me blow up the picture so you guys can see it, because otherwise you are not going to be able to see it. Shout out to Twitter and how they do not zoom in. But anyways, let me lead into it before I pull it up. My basic points when I heard this was, okay, shocking. You know, my initial thoughts was it's hilarious in the instant karma that is Billy Joe Saunders making fun of crackheads and crack being a stimulant just a mere week and a half ago or so, and now getting popped for a stimulant is the best form of karma I think I have ever seen in my life. And just that in and of itself makes me really, really happy because it's just funny. Like that, even though I'm going to get into the actual like seriousness of the matter and how he probably has a really strong case for zero punishment, to be quite honest. But like I said, let's get into the particulars of the situation. I was like, come on, what are you doing here? There you go. Okay. I hope you guys can read this a little bit better. If not, I apologize. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more. Following reports of an adverse analytical finding in a test carried out by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association on WBO World Middleweight Champion Billy Joe Saunders, we can confirm that the product concerned is permitted to be used out of competition by United Kingdom Anti-Doping, UKAD, in line with the regulations of the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. For the avoidance of doubt, the product in question was a common discongestant nasal spray, which I was assumed was going to be the excuse. The British Boxing Board of Control, under whose jurisdiction Billy Joe Saunders is licensed, are affiliated only to UKAD/WADA. Today, the BBOC have confirmed that Mr. Saunders is not in breach of BBOC or UKAD anti-doping regulations and is therefore in good standing and is licensed to box and defend his world title on October 20th. Mr. Saunders has been tested a number of times in 2018, blah, blah, blah. So let's just get to the information here. And if you did not understand it, that's fine. That's what I am here for, vaguely. Even though I'm not the biggest expert, if you want to find an expert on this that is a little more in depth when it comes to the scientific knowledge of it, Ian Kidd at Bloody Elbow, at Ian Kidd on Twitter. Go follow him. Go look at his account. Definitely a lot of information you can gather there that you may not know just from following the regular boxing media, because regular boxing media is atrocious about just knowledge of PD regulation. VADA, if you do not know, I'm going to try to break it down in the very simplistic term. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is in connection with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, which covers all anti-doping regulation for the Olympics, most European sports, if not all European sports, and just a wider range of PD regulation, anti-doping regulation, and sports overall in the world. There is such thing as the WADA code, which is seen as the top-tier code for anti-doping. Usually speaking, 99.9% of the time, VADA and USADA, Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, and the U.S. Anti-Doping Association, follow the WADA code because the WADA code is the gold standard. WADA has a clause, what's the right term? Rule, regulation, where there is in-competition and out-of-competition testing. Out-of-competition is the window basically 12 hours before and after your event, so basically the 24 hours of your event or your fight or whatever it is for boxing. That is called the in-competition window. And they have the out-of-competition window. Jump tube, no. The IOC tests, but they use WADA. So, VADA and USADA and WADA rarely make decisions. So, they won't ban you, right? Like, WADA and VADA don't hand down suspensions. That's not how it works. The WBC or the Nevada State Athletic Commission or the BBOC, they would come and give out the suspension. The anti-doping regulators, not regulators, almost like scientists, as in WADA, VADA, USADA, they don't hand out suspensions. That is the regulatory bodies to do. If that sort of makes sense, there's a division there. So for the Olympics, for example, WADA is the ones actually doing the test. IOC is the ones handing out suspensions. I hope that sort of clears that thought up, Jump Tube, in the chat. I think that was a good question, though. I'm trying to remember where I was talking about, where I was at. So back to sort of Billy Joe Saunders' case and the out of competition sort of explanation. So certain drugs are completely allowed out of competition. For WADA, again, not VADA or USADA. VADA or USADA have a different term, clause, whatever you want to term you want to use, where they say all prohibited banned substances are banned at all times. They really don't have the out of competition clause in their writing. However, they follow the WADA code. So even though in their writing and in their sort of rules and regulations per VADA, per USADA, it doesn't say out of competition, in competition, they will still follow that rule per the WADA code, because the WADA code is the gold standard for PD regulation. So drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, most recreational drugs, that's why stimulant, it was talked about here. Most of the time, if it's deemed out of competition or under a certain threshold, because it's not a zero tolerance policy, for even like weed, like in competition. I forget what the exact levels are, because it depends on which body you're being regulated by. But you can actually test technically positive for marijuana on fight night if it's under a certain threshold. That's because it's a out of competition drug. It's not a performance enhancing drug. It's a banned substance. Such as alcohol. To make it very layman for everyone out there, because 90% of us have beer or alcohol at some point in our lives. Think about it in that way, in that terms. So WADA, VADA, USADA, their thinking is that, well, an athlete can have a beer out, as long as they're not drunk while competing, right? That's the process. So you can technically test positive for a certain level of alcohol, if it's below a certain blood alcohol level count, right? It's that similar concept. You can drive a car as long as you're under a certain threshold. It's that same concept. So even though, to be honest, the Billy Joe Saunders case seems fishy from the very outside in a very 1970s and 60s way of looking at PEDs, up and down performance, up and down physique, even the excuse, whatever term you want to use, nasal spray has been used before for stimulants. It's always has sort of been the go-to. I feel like those are red flags for most people when they aren't really cued in on out of competition testing, in competition testing. The WADA code, does VADA and USADA follow that? When do they follow that? And it's very hard to understand and hard to follow unless you follow certain people. That's, again, why I say always go follow experts. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just relaying what the experts have said. Ian Kidd and others who literally do this for a living. They cover PD regulation in combat sports for a living, and they get paid for it. They're believing this excuse, and I believe it too. It's similar to the Canelo's case. Like, the reason why, or even very recently, like David Benavidez. David Benavidez just got popped for cocaine, right? That was an out of competition test, similar to this test. This was not in competition, even though he's in training camp. That's not in competition. Why are you testing for these substances? When, in theory, I understand VADA does not follow that regulation by WADA per their regs, but after the test, per David Benavidez, per obviously the Billy Joe Saunders case, they do follow out of competition testing, or at least they allow it to be that determination to be done by the local sanctioning body or regulatory body. Main event Mark saying the camp he chosen is suspect too, right? Because he trains with Dominic Ingle and the Galahad brothers, I want to say, right? And one of them tested positive before. I want to say he got banned for like a year or two. Look, I mean, if you want to say that Billy Joe Saunders is dirty and cheap, not you, Mark. I know you're probably a little more reasonable. But I know there's people out there, there's media members saying that. You can. Like, just know that you don't... A, you're not providing all the information. B, you sound like you are trapped in old talking points from the Soviet Union and our fear of them in the Olympics. C, I think you're doing it, not necessarily fans, but more the media side. You're doing a disservice to your audience. You are. And there's been reporters that I highly respect really sort of grabbing the pitchforks for Billy Joe Saunders here. And I get it. The guy came out and said that Canelo Alvarez should be banned for life because that's positive for PDs. And look what happened here. You know, should you be banned for life, Billy Joe? Doesn't sound so smart now, does it? But same with Canelo, same with Billy Joe Saunders. They have very strong cases. And also, just to put in a greater perspective here, if these two individuals, Canelo and Billy Joe, had these same exact situations happen under WADA rules, happen under even USADA rules, because USADA actually allows out of competition. It's more of a VADA thing. Both these situations, either A, would not have been notified to the press because it would not have been counted as a positive PED test, or not PED test, banned substance test. And B, it would have been notified and then said, this is nothing, we're going to move on. Because that's what has happened with these other entities. USADA has done that in the recent past. WADA has done that consistently for decades now. You know, and again, for VADA to just be haphazard in their delivery of this information, haphazard in their procedures, you know, it just shows that boxing PD regulation is just an utter joke. It is. It is an utter joke. Shout out to Billy Joe Saunders. That shows do not make fun of drug addicts on the street, because then God will smite you down. Shout out to Billy Joe.
Are you off your tits? Have you been smoking something?
God knows. We're going to get to some more news. As I pulled up. Maurice Hooker versus Alex Salcedo finalized November 16th, ESPN. We already knew this. Salcedo won the purse bid, and Top Rank did. This was all, sort of known to us. Fight will be in Oklahoma City, in the hometown of Salcedo. Makes perfect sense since they won the purse bid. Very curious to see what the card will look like around it. And on top of that, what the viewership will be like. Because I think this fight's going to be fantastic. I just don't know if it really captures a casual fan base. And I doubt they really put the money behind it for marketing purposes to build it into that fight. Because I think, arguably, the winner of this fight might be the best 140-pounder on the planet. I'm just saying. I know all of you Regis Progress fans out there and Josh Taylor fans are all up in arms right now, but it's possible that the winner of this fight is the best guy in that division. I mean, I forgot Jose Ramirez. My bad. Alex Lemon out there somewhere in the ether. Let's move on to, I believe it's the last boxing news of the day before we head into MMA topics. So if you want to call in and discuss only the boxing topics, you can call in right now, 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. if we want to talk some boxing before we talk about the UFC and MMA news of the day. But this PBC card that was supposed to have Victor Ortiz and John Molina Jr., obviously the main event has been canceled per Victor Ortiz being charged with sexual assault and rape. So now the new main event is Brandon Figueroa versus Oscar Escandon, which, to be honest, is actually a really good fight, even though King Tug Nambar just beat Oscar Escandon in a really great fight. If you haven't checked out King Tug, go check out that prospect. Amazing talent. Definitely going to be interesting to see. Main event, Mark saying, wait, Matt, you like Maurice Hooker? I like him now after that Terry Flanagan fight. Like, let's be honest here. I think most of us thought he was going to lose that Flanagan fight, and he showed up in enemy territory. Put on probably one of his better performances of his career. I would say convincingly won that fight as well. Showed added skill to his game. Yeah, I like Maurice Hooker. And again, if he beats Alex Saucedo in definitive or at least convincing fashion, that's a really good win in your feather. It is. Even though Saucedo may not be the most proven guy at 140, none of these guys are proven. None of them. The closest one to being proven is Josh Taylor with a win over Victor Postal, who fought one time in 3 years after he got beat up by Terrence Crawford for 12 rounds straight. So I don't know if that is proven. That's probably the good argument to be proven, but none of these guys are. Maurice Hooker beating Terry Flanagan was a great win in my book. Prograis is about to clean up his leftovers there in the World Boxing Super Series. Yeah, Saucedo win would be huge for him, and vice versa. I think if Alex Saucedo comes out here and beats Maurice Hooker and gets that title, he makes a claim. Like, let's be honest. Like, you don't think if Saucedo comes out and beats Hooker that he couldn't beat a Jose Ramirez or Regis Prograis? Like, that doesn't seem out of the question if, again, he beats Maurice Hooker in convincing fashion and vice versa. So, yeah, I'm not going to say I like Maurice Hooker because his style can be kind of ugly sometimes. He can be sometimes a boring fighter, and plus he's gotten decisions he shouldn't have in the past. I've been at some of those fights. He got those decisions. So I definitely know the hate around Maurice Hooker. I know why there is that hate, but he's a talented fighter. You can't deny that. Sometimes talented fighters aren't the greatest to watch. Unfortunately. That is what it is sometimes. And plus, I think he has been improving. So God knows what he looks like against Saucedo and keep going on in his career. But yes, anyways, let's move on to the UFC news of the day. Per ESPN and Brett Okamoto, UFC trying to line up a fight between Jon Jones, Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232. Just make it happen. Just make it happen. I'll be honest. Jon Jones against Alexander Gustafsson's rematch I've wanted for a very long time. I remember the first fight vividly. It was one of the better fights that year. Though I do think it gets romanticized a little bit too much nowadays, to be honest. Maybe a little bit critical, but to be honest. However, these are two of the top three guys in that division. They are. And even if it's not for an interim title, you put that along with Chris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes on that last, New Year's Eve card, I'm hyped. I mean, take my money. Take it. And I'll sit here and I'll shit on USADA, and not really USADA. I'll shit on the people that champion USADA as some white knight in this game. And just PD regulation as a whole. Like, it is a little bit of a joke. Jon Jones' case is a little bit evident of that. However, if you're not going to put it on the UFC 230 card, which makes the most sense in the world, because out of fear of media blowback, which understandable, I definitely think that UFC 232 makes probably the most sense. Pair it with Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, which probably not say can't headline a card by itself. Chris Cyborg has actually proven to be a decent pay-per-view draw. 150,000 to 300,000 pay-per-view buys is pretty decent. So yeah, I think again, if you pair that with the Jon Jones comeback, that does 800,000 to 1 million pay-per-view buys, and I think that's a fantastic event. Can't wait to watch it. Though I'll be honest, I've been sort of, throwing this around in my head a little bit. Jon Jones at heavyweight against Alistair Overeem. I would love that fight. I know they sort of train together now at Greg Jackson's, but come on. That should be amazing. Let's move on to some more news of the day, or more sort of just topics. Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz still trying to get this 165-pound division up in arms. Jump Tube, before I get to Dustin Poirier, Jump Tube saying, who you got in the McGregor-Khabib fight? And main event Mark saying, man, I hope Khabib upsets McGregor. I actually think McGregor's the underdog per the betting odds right now. I could be wrong about that. Maybe somebody can look that up for me other than me. But I thought Khabib was the favorite. But I'm actually picking McGregor. I think McGregor's going to knock him out in the first round. I know. Shocking, right? And don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a 50-50 fight. Either McGregor knocks him out early or Khabib submits him mid-round, round 3 on. It's one of those two. And if you pick one or the other, I really don't care. That fight's amazing. I just want to watch that one and just be entertained by it. But speaking of Conor McGregor's leftovers, Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz trying to get this new division up and running. Nate Diaz coming out on Twitter saying, UFC told me that Dustin doesn't want to fight 165 pounds. I'll be back next year, ... with the deuces emoji. And then Dustin Poirier quote tweets that and says, hold that noise. I'm 100% down.
I want smoke.
Look, obviously, this might be a little bit inside baseball here, but the UFC does not want to bend to the will of Nate Diaz. They've never wanted that. And I think the reason why we're not going to get this obvious fix and a quick fix to the UFC 230 problem is because it's Nate Diaz wanting it. Dana White doesn't want to do that. God knows what the new owners of the UFC and their sort of thinking and feelings are towards Nate Diaz. I don't know, to be honest. But Dana White sure as shit does not like Nate Diaz, so why would he bend over backwards to sort of make this fight and promote a new division? Let's be honest. It's just not going to happen. Even though, like I've said, it is the quickest fix for this UFC 230 problem. Now that Jon Jones is really looking like he's not going to be attached to this card, which is shocking to me that they don't just put up with the blowback and put him on that event and save it, really save it. If you're not going to do that, Nate Diaz is the logical choice. Making the main event, put it 5 rounds, and even if, I think most of us that are actually fans of the sport, we don't need this division in order for it to be the main event and us buy the fight. Right? Like, if they just put Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier at 155 and a non-title fight as the main event for 5 rounds, no title on the line, I think it does pretty good buy rates as well. It may not do as great, but that's an arguable point. I mean, it may be marginal at most. Again, I think if you're the UFC, it makes the most sense, but also if you know the UFC, it doesn't make the most sense. Just from a relationship standpoint, how they feel about these two guys, they're not gonna think that. And let's be honest, if this was Conor McGregor asking for a 165-pound division, he was not the main event of a pay-per-view, yet he was on the card, which is never going to happen. But they would do this. They would. 100%. Like, let's not kid here. Like, that is the game. If you can provide money for them and you toe the company line, even though Conor McGregor, to be fair, does sort of buck the line sometimes, it doesn't matter. You're going to get your way. And Nate Diaz, while he does make money for the UFC, does not toe that company line, has said fuck the UFC ever since that press conference. They have no intention of making him happy. And unfortunately, I think Nate Diaz, who I'm a huge fan of, just listen to this show intro, you haven't done yourself any service here. You've done yourself a disservice here, unfortunately. Even though you are in probably your complete right to be upset. This is the business world. This is the entertainment world. where hurt feelings in business lead to blackballing and bad business practices and downright, what's the term? The best term to use. Not extortion, but just abuse. Like this is when the UFC got bought by basically Hollywood, it just solidified what this was. Let's not be honest here. But let's move on. Shocking news coming out from, I think it was yesterday. The UFC's UK partnership with BT Sports is officially over in 2019. They have now been picked up by 11 Sports, which is a streaming service similar to DAZN for £5 or quid. I don't know exactly what you people over there use in terms of terms for money nowadays, but yes, for £5 or £5, whichever one. 11 Sports streaming all of the UFC cards live in the UK and Ireland. I don't have much to say about it because I'm not in that market. I don't know the market. Hopefully some of my UK commenters or maybe callers email me if you're in the UK, mixedcombatradio@gmail.com to get a free international call-in link. I'm very curious to hear what the reaction is from my listening base about this news. Is it going to receive the same criticism that, let's say, like DAZN received? I would assume so, to be quite honest. Especially taken from BT Sports to that. That is quite shocking. Going to move on, though, to by way of MMA fighting. Scott Coker saying that Eddie Alvarez to Bellator doesn't seem likely at this point. Let's get to here's a little bit of his words.
Eddie Alvarez is a free agent from the UFC. Are you guys discussing anything with him right now?
I think that they had a conversation with Eddie, and I'm not sure where it's at, but it's. I don't think it took a second. It wasn't like something that was picking up any steam, so I'm not sure.
So it doesn't seem likely him coming to Bellator?
Yeah, it doesn't seem likely at this point.
Yeah, so the hopes of Eddie Alvarez versus Michael Chandler 3 is over, guys. Let's not get emotional. It's okay. It's okay, guys. Be strong. But Bellator not getting Eddie Alvarez. Definitely not the end of the world, but definitely wanted to update that sort of free agent news over there in MMA because Eddie Alvarez is still, not necessarily a draw, but he is, at worst, a top 10 lightweight of all time. At best, top 5. And I've definitely heard arguments of him being the best lightweight of all time. I'm not going to make that argument, but I know there's others that I respect that have made that argument. For Bellator not to get him back, that is kind of sad. I would like to see sort of a resolution on the Michael Chandler fight and sort of rivalry. But Eddie Alvarez back in the UFC, hopefully, that's what this means. Fights like with the Nate Diaz fight, for example, can materialize. They've had a rivalry for some time that's never actually turned out to be a fight. So I would love to see that action as well. And just there's tons of options out there for Eddie Alvarez in the UFC. Jose Aldo moving up to 155. Imagine Eddie Alvarez versus Jose Aldo. You tell me you wouldn't want to see that? Let's be honest here. There's a lot of fights for Eddie Alvarez still in the UFC that are still better probably than obviously the Bellator option. Jump to saying that's a step down from BT Sports, though. Yeah, it is. Definitely. It has to be. Because from what I've always been explained to and told by people in the UK is that BT is like their ESPN in a way. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how it's always been sort of told to me. That BT is the ESPN of the UK. Whether that's true or not, or whether it's that to that degree, I don't know. That's not even true, man. That's funny though, but no, that's not true, man. That's funny. But no, I'm not. Anyways, shout out to Wood in the chat, man. Long-time listener of my other show I used to be on. Shout out to you, Wood. The guy that actually listened before I was even on that show. Shout out to you, man. Let's get to some 50 Cent news for Bellator. 50 Cent to award Bellator Welterweight Grand Prix winner a $1 million cash prize. There we go. Shout out to 50 Cent. Also, I believe he is now the official his champagne. I forget what the name of it is the official champagne sponsor of Bellator or something. I forget the exact news of it. But 50 making some moves over there for Bellator, so salute to him. Collecting that bag either way. Cannot be mad about that at all. Especially as I got sponsored by an event from FN Vodka, which I believe is his vodka. So shout out to 50, man. Always love your stuff there. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the show. I'm sorry. Oh, Big Al. Hold on. Whoa. Big Al saying off topic, but who's listening to the Carter 5 tonight? Yo, it's here. It's here. Where's my flex bomb at? Yes.
Oh, what are you talking about, man?
Oh, that was complete an accident. I'm sorry. I did not mean to bring Westbrook out like that. Which remind me, I have a hipster's music review in the tuck that I never released on Black's new album. What's the name of it? Free Black? No, that was his first album. What was the name of Black's new album? Fuck. Anyways, I probably might do one tonight for that, because Carter 5, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not like the biggest Lil Wayne fan. I'm not. But it's Lil Wayne. He is still like one of the most iconic and greatest rappers of all time, especially of my lifetime. Of my lifetime, Lil Wayne's up there for just being iconic, having some really dope verses, let's be honest. You know, especially maybe like a decade ago plus. But oh yeah, Fern saying won't front. I'll take a listen to. What do you mean front, Fern? Who would front about listening to Lil Wayne's new album, especially a Carter album? Those are like the blueprint albums. You can't just not listen to those. It's sacrilegious as a hip hop fan. So, anyways, definitely gonna listen to that one. Big Al, thank you for bringing that one up. But anyways, definitely gonna listen to that. Might release a hipster's music review and the full album on Patreon, by the way. So let's hope it actually gets dropped tonight. Oh, actually, hold on. Big Al, isn't it coming out tomorrow? I thought it was coming out because obviously most albums get released Thursday night or midnight, right? But so it's Friday technically. But I thought he was releasing on Saturday because that's his birthday, or maybe I'm mixing up days. Anyway, I could be very wrong about that, Big Al. But hopefully it actually gets released. JumpTube, I am not answering that question. But I love the off-topic questions out here at the end of the show. Yeah, it's just little comment about it. Creative differences, man. Creative differences. I'm here. I'm loving it. Definitely hit the like button, share the show, subscribe. Big Al saying today is his birthday. See, Al, okay. You know, not everyone is a hip-hop, encyclopedia like you, okay? Thought his birthday was Saturday. I'm like, okay, it's getting released on Saturday, cool. Anyways, shots at me. Oh, I had the music turned down, so the shots are down. That just sounded pathetic. Anyways, I hope everyone has a great day. Go to patreon.com/Mixed Comment Radio. I hope everyone, again, has a great weekend. Tomorrow, obviously, fights. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of shows because obviously Friday we usually have our Friday show, like regular scheduled time, but we have fights all day tomorrow. So just stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter, Mount Hunter MCR, to stay up to date on anything that happens on the show. Wood, Main Event Mark, JumpTube, Big Al, Fern. Who else was here in the chat hanging out with me today? That's about it. CMD Boxing. What's up, man? I hope everyone, again, has a great night. Stay safe. And see y'all tomorrow to enjoy the fights. Peace.